Okay. Hello, we would like to welcome everybody to the April DRC meeting. The meeting is informal and designed to guide applicants through the process of obtaining a Certificate of Appropriateness, or COA, for projects within the city's historic districts in light of the Historic District Design Guidelines. Applicant participation in DRC meetings is voluntary but highly recommended. Changes made or suggestions taken by the applicant based on the discussions with the DRC are the applicant's choice, but DRC makes no representation as to whether any changes or suggestions made during the meeting will be approved by the voting body, the Historic Zoning Commission. And today we have 4 items on the agenda. And when the item is called, we would like for the applicant to come forward, introduce yourself, and generally describe your item in 3 to 5 minutes. Thank you. And item 1 is a discussion of alterations at 800 Fear Street. And Amanda McQuarrie is the applicant, and I don't know if Amanda's here. So I would think we'll not discuss this without the applicant here.
Right. We could come back to it at the end
That
of the
works.
other items to see if she's here.
And our second item is discussion of alterations at 432 through 438 Main Street, and it's the masonry on the building, and Karen Cochran is the applicant. And Joy Bryan is the staff project leader. So do you want to come introduce yourself, Karen?
Where do you want me, Mary? Right here? Probably have to come over.
Well, no, get over here where there's a mic.
That's good. I've got one of these for each of you. Julie, you want to pass these out? These are some pictures that will make my conversation a little more understandable. There we go. Okay, so I am back and hope that I have worked out a good solution. Emily told me that you all had received in your email a copy of the assessment, the initial assessment that Centric did on the building. But if you want a copy of it, I have that here for you as well. I hired them last year before I started really doing any specific work on the building.
It is.
Just pull it closer. Is that better? I'm so sorry. So if any of y'all want this assessment, I'm happy to give it to you. I hired them last year before I really started in on this so that I'd have a keen idea of what needed to be done. Basically, the scope of work is the same that it was when I was here a couple months ago. We would put up scaffolding. We're talking about just the facade of the front and curved right around Fifth Avenue, right past the door, Starbucks door. So we would be putting up scaffolding overhead with overhead protection so folks could walk into the shops on the first floor. We would be removing all of the white glazed brick that is damaged. We're talking about whether a quarter of a size or maybe even smaller, because I sure don't want to have to go back through this again in 10 or 15 years. And we would be removing all, in this plan after we met a couple more times with our mason, we'd be removing all of the green brick and I will pass this around, but it's on. Did you pass that, Julie? Oh, yes, that's it. So it would be on this, the two window jambs, and then the lower one. And this picture does not have the current awnings that are here. This before the awnings were put up. This is an old picture. But it would be replacing that line, and that line. Not the green up here, not the green there. Then any of the bricks here that are not damaged would be used to fill in on these lower spots down here that have a lot of chips on them. And then here's some examples of the white brick, etc. But I think you've got some of those pictures. Anyway, I will pass this one, these two. This is where you can kind of see the stripes. We finally, after feeling like I almost went to Amsterdam and back to find brick, we finally, my mason, by the way, is Wasco Masonry. And bless his heart, he has turned up the every brick company in the South and in the country practically. Anyway, we came up with these two, which are really, really good. And I think you have, Emily has a picture up there of this green, so you can see the faded colors on each side of that green are because of fading from 125 or some years. So there's not really much of a way we're going to match all of that. And then the white, which we have a picture of too, is just identical. It's amazing. It's quite good. So we've probably, this is from two different companies, but we're going to replace somewhere around 350. There's the white. 350 to 400 of the white bricks. Most of those are in the kind of upper levels. And then 1,600 to 1,700 of the green brick. So it's a pretty extensive operation, I guess you could call it. We are also redoing all of the mortar because the mortar had become very porous, had chipped out in many places, and then the rain getting back behind the mortar and the freezing is a lot of what caused the chipping. So we're going to replace the mortar on all of the glazed brick area, even though it's... So that way we'll take out the glazed brick that's damaged and put in the new. We're going to redo the wall flashings over all the window head locations, install spiral ties at bulging locations. Not sure. Tyler, you probably know what that is. I'm not 100% sure what that is. And then we're going to clean everything. And it's we're not sure how long this is going to take. It kind of depends on what we get into with the mortar joints. And that will be colored to match what is basically already there, what is aged out but is already there. So the building will have much more of a consistency. It won't look like somebody put a BB gun up on the front of it. That's what we'd like to do with your permission. And my mason said he does not know yet what the lag time will be on it because the masonry is taking a long time to get in. It could be 30 to 40 weeks. But we'll just take that when we know more about it. So that's my story. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. The historic design guidelines do recommend and actually encourage the repair work and maintenance of our historic buildings in the local historic districts. We want to thank Ms. Cochran for her hard work and efforts to go and find the replacement brick that is compatible with the Five Points building, because it is one of the most viewable, I guess, buildings on Main Street, because since you can really see it from 5 different points. So the strategy and the guidelines also encourage to do repairs, but also keep as much of the original fabric and materials as possible. So I think the strategy of incorporating as much of the usable brick in the lower, more viewable sections would be appropriate. We also would encourage that if the brick is in better shape than they anticipated, then just to keep as much of that original material as possible.
Right.
But we would like to hear your feedback on the samples that have been provided and the images that we can show on the projector here, just to see if Ms. Cochran is on the right track about the replacement bricks that she has in hand today.
By the way, when we met the last time with the mason and held those bricks up, Joey and Emily were with us, and so they got to sort of hear him
Yes.
and
Yes.
see the lay of the land.
That is correct. And we, while we were there, we tried to show or put the brick up in different lights and shadows on the building. And I think the wider, glossier samples had a better, it fit in better with the original bricks that were there. The more matte whites, you could really tell that they were different. So that would be one of our recommendations, is to go with a glossier white sample.
Yeah.
Are there any of the commissioners that have any feedback?
So this is the one we're talking about when Mr. Bryan mentioned the glossier white. That's this one that
Yes.
we're looking at.
This is, you want to see it up close?
Well, I can see it. I was
personal?
just wondering
Okay.
if that's the one he was referring to.
Yeah, we had several that we held up. And trying to find the best match.
Yeah.
Of course, that's weathered. The white brick is, it's over 100 years old, but still, actually, the white brick turns out to be more difficult to find the right tone than the green. So I was really kind of surprised about that.
Yeah. Yeah. I just had one other question, because on the Centric Architecture's report,
Yes, sir.
so they provide a recommended approach and then an alternate approach. So the recommended approach says to carefully remove the deteriorated glazed brick and replace with new matching brick. The alternate approach is not what we're talking about here, which
No.
is replace all, correct?
No, Mary knows well, I've restored a lot of old buildings, and I want everything to be as original as it can be.
Well, we appreciate
And
that.
the only reason that I finally went along with the mason on his recommendation with these stripes is because, number one, of the visibility. Number two, the consistency would be really important. And number three, we might have more chipping on the original green brick, and then what would we do? So it just seemed to make sense to have it all be visually consistent.
Yeah.
But that's normally not my tact, but I did agree with him, and he had to really convince me.
Thank you.
Any other comments?
The only thing I would say is when Dr. Sam White built this building, he had good taste.
Oh,
There's no doubt about it, and I think you're being a very good steward of this building, and it's very much appreciated.
well, I want to invite any of you that want to go to the second floor and look up on the second floor. I am so proud of what my tenants have done. Anyway, they've just taken it on, and we were getting ready to replace some carpet in the hallway, not wall to wall, but just a strip. And they said, no, we want the real floor. And I said, yes. So no carpet strip, just the real floor.
That's awesome. Yes.
I wanted to ask staff again too about repointing of the mortar. Is it staff's recommendation to go with that? Is it patched repointing or is it full?
That would fall into just maintenance. Mortar work is easily it as long as the brick is there, that's kind of the main focal point. So we would support the mortar work as well.
Okay. And is the intent to try and match the aged look of the mortar?
That's what
Because old
Yeah.
mortar looks different than new.
Right, and that mortar work needs to be done, Mason told me, when it is not freezing, because he refuses to use the additive that goes into mortar that you can put on when weather is freezing. He will not use that.
Well, I think you've done an excellent job on the colors too. So,
Thank
yeah, it's hard picking white. There are a lot of
Yes.
whites.
There's a lot of whites, right?
And you've got a lot of different exposures to that building too, so you're going to get a lot of variations in colors, but
That's
they're
what I
beautiful,
came to
beautiful
realize.
choices.
Yeah.
I feel like it's just a gift to downtown. It's a one-of-a-kind building and appreciate it. And I think what I understood from Karen, the mortar is actually causing some structural problems, and that's the reason you're working on the mortar.
Yeah, you can tell when you look at the brick, a lot of places the mortar has actually fallen out. And so the water gets behind it and then makes the glaze pop when it freezes or
And
expands.
preventative maintenance
Yes.
is also encouraged.
Yes.
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 May I really quickly? Sorry, I was just a few minutes late. I'm very impressed by the green. I think that is amazing. One thing that in this comparison photograph that just jumps out to me is the other bricks have this black speckling.
I know.
And I don't know if that's age or if that is just the way the brick was made. And so is the idea, I don't see that in the replacement.
No,
And
it's not.
Did the brick manufacturer have any comment on that particular angle?
No, they are still, I mean, they have a little bit of this, but they're still trying to get as much as I'm going to need. I don't know if it was aging. It could have easily been. I just don't know the answer to that.
Yeah, typically those
Thank you.
those little black spots are iron flecks and things, and the processes 100 years ago were usually much less pure. You know, it wasn't as scientific as it is today. Scientific for 100 years ago, but usually these glazes now they can get really pure. Those come from like coppers usually, that green,
Right.
and it's just so pure that you don't get that speckling, which is in brick world really is called iron fleck.
Yeah. Well, I
so-
just was wondering if that would, once it's all dealt with, stand out. That was my,
I don't know.
because the green is really good in my opinion, just looking at it. But that was what jumped out to me when I saw it.
Well, Tyler, I've got, to Josh's point, one of the things I learned from talking to numbers of the brick companies is that they used to put lead in the brick, and they don't do that anymore. So that could have been possibly why there was specks. But they don't put any lead in the glazing anymore.
Well, Randall, I suppose you'll be working with the applicant on the scaffolding and all that, so.
Sure.
Okay, thank you
Okay.
so much.
Well done.
Just thank you. I love that building too.
And I'm serious about taking any of y'all upstairs to look at
Yeah.
Yeah, I do, unless you want, do you want? No. Okay. Then I can use them.
Right.
Absolutely.
Okay,
Thank you.
Thank you, honey.
it's awesome.
So much.
We're now at item 3, and it's discussion of alterations and additions at 600 Boyd Mill Avenue, the historic home, and Matt Smith is representing the applicant. So we're now talking about the Magnolia Hall portion. Is that,
Hello. Since I had submitted the DRC documents, had further discussion with the clients and small design change, which I wanted to pass that out to you.
and we did have a productive site visit, so.
I appreciate you all coming out the other week. It was very beneficial. Those of you who were able to make it out. And based on some of your comments, sorry, I'm talking away from the mic. A couple of design changes based on your comments. So it was, I think, very productive meeting, and thank you all for that, for coming out. In the DRC documents, I had mentioned that the owners had very graciously and surprisingly thought that they might not need to enclose any portion of the porch that surrounds what I'm calling the existing kitchen. So as you recall from the visit, just to orient yourself, on the plan, on the screen, or here, the one that's to the far right is the stone garage. This is what we're calling the old kitchen, which that's that gable structure, that vernacular gable structure. Then I'm calling this the new kitchen, and that is that vernacular wing that's attached to the mansion. And I'll give you copies as well, I'm sorry.
Is this different than what was submitted a week ago? Or the same?
It is different in one aspect, which I'll explain right now. On the plan, between the old kitchen and the new kitchen, what was submitted, that was exterior space. After a subsequent discussion with the owners, we decided that that would be best served as becoming interior space. On the photograph, you can see two photos taken from that space, one facing towards the front, one facing towards the rear. And so you can see that what that looks like, and it's bound out on each end by that trellis structure. So so as you can see on the plan, that would become interior space. One thing that would allow us to do is to not have to turn any windows into doors, as we had discussed at the last meeting. And Mary, you and I had discussed that. And when you look at those old windows, you just don't want to mess with them unless you really have to. And so I rethought the pantry, where the pantry could go. And so that's exactly what I'm doing, and putting the pantry in this in-between space. So keeping both the front and the porch clear. You know, the other thing that I had talked about at the on-site meeting was enclosing that rear porch. So that rear porch is now open, and so that only space that's enclosed is the the space between the two kitchens. And back to the photograph, the owners had wanted to, they would be okay with keeping that trellis look with this new wall that would be constructed. But they would prefer to have a hurricane shutter look, as I've kind of mocked up in this photograph. Visually, I think it might be a little, less obvious. It would call attention to itself, I think, a little less than keeping the trellis look. And behind the hurricane shutters would be glass. Possibly panelized up 3 feet, but then glass, in a way that's similar to the home that you had mentioned to me, Mary. What was that home that you
Right.
asked me to take a look at as an example?
Meeting of the Waters.
Meeting of the Waters. So kind of a similar tactic there. And per one of your recommendations, the breezeway that connects the garage to the old kitchen, which we're proposing, has been shifted forward. So we're not utilizing that existing door at the garage anymore. And that just requires that we have to move that, the electrical panels. And I believe the other parts are, of the project, the rear porch and the master bedroom are the same as what we had discussed at the on-site meeting. Just a note of explanation regarding the exterior of the, okay, yes, so since we have the plan up on the screen, you can see the porch and then the master wing, which contains the master closet and master bath, with the master bedroom occupying that rear corner, left corner of the mansion. And then if you could go to the slide that has the 3D view of that, you can see that I'm proposing an expression, architectural expression of that wing, which is a more formal expression similar to the mansion, rather than a vernacular expression like the service wings. The one thing I'm doing is, in order to prevent the roof of this proposed master wing from encroaching onto the second floor window, I have a connector piece, which would be expressed as if it's part of the porch or an extension of the porch, and has that shallower porch roof slope. So that mediates between the master addition and the mansion. And would you like me to explain anything else, or do you have any further questions, or?
The addition, what is the material on it going to be?
Brick, to match as closely as possible the brick on the mansion.
Okay. And I think Emily was the staff project leader on this, so is there any comments or clarification?
So this proposal has appeared before the DRC discussion in addition at a different location on this building. As we've covered, that the DRC had a site visit to tour the grounds of the historic building and the proposed location of the new buildings, which was extremely helpful, I think, to everyone involved. The new design that Matt's provided for the submittal reduce the impact to the architectural features of the house and the garage. I'll start with the addition part. The guidelines recommend placing additions in subordinate locations at the rear of the building or on an obscured facade not readily visible from the street in order to minimize their impact. The application meets this guideline by placing the addition on the rear of the building, but the building is unique in the fact that the rear of the building will be seen from Highway 96. Additions are to be designed to be subordinate in appearance to the historic building. Considerations includes placement, size, massing, scale, height, setbacks, and materials. Additions are to be designed so that there is the least possible loss of historic fabric, and so the character-defining features of the historic building are not removed, damaged, or obscured. By placing the addition on the left rear facade where there are no existing doors or windows, the application meets this guideline. The massing, scale, and proportions are to be subordinate to the historic building. Next, we'll discuss the porches. The guidelines recommend designing new porches and stoops to rear or side facades with minimal visibility. The new rear porch addition meets this guideline, although the site is uniquely visible. Let's see, I'll pull that up on the screen for us, right here. The guidelines recommend avoid enclosing porches on highly visible facades with screens, glass, or any other material. The guidelines recommend avoid adding porches or stoops to front facades or highly visible facades if they did not exist historically. Additionally, screened or glass porch additions are to be designed with minimum number of vertical and horizontal framing members needed to support the screening and recessed panels behind the existing porch columns and rails. Use wooden frames only and do not remove any historic elements to accommodate the enclosure. Next, we'll discuss the garage and breezeway area. Let's see. Let me zoom in for us. So the guidelines recommend preserving and maintaining historic accessory structures which typically are detached from the principal building. The guidelines recommend designing a breezeway to be simple and detailing and subordinate to an accessory structure. Choose a breezeway location that lessens its length and expanse. Use traditional materials with appearances similar to the doors on the historic building. Design doors and doorways to an addition to read as secondary in appearance and detailing to the historic building. The specifications should be provided with the COA application since the new carriage doors, let's see. This is what staff was basing that on, that this is the only visual we were given for the new garage doors. And upon submittal for a COA, we would like to identify the proposed roofing materials and color, addition materials, and the brick, which Matt just mentioned that he plans to match the brick on the historic building to the addition, and the window specifications. Thank you.
Okay, to clarify, the proposed rear porch will be open, no screening. And the garage doors, I'll be happy to, I would like to really nail that down and choose a specific door. As of right now, it's going to be a hinged door rather than an overhead door, so it'll be a true carriage, old-fashioned. And all of the new columns, including ones on the breezeway and the rear porch, would be detailed after the existing columns on the house.
Okay. Is there anyone on the commission that would want to comment on any elements of the project or the addition?
Matt, I just want to be clear, so both porches on each side are not going to be enclosed now, just the breezeway?
Correct. Correct. So those columns that define those porches will be free and clear, no screening, no glass, nothing. And so that new wall will be near the corner, just back a few inches or so.
Okay.
But yeah.
Thank you.
I think the changes since that you made since we were there are the breezeway, the not enclosed porches, and how you would, the open part with the lattice, that you would choose to do that with the shuttered.
Yes, that's
Those-
correct.
I think it would be beneficial if we would talk about the shape and massing of the new addition. And so I think that that would be beneficial for us to discuss.
Well, just to close out the other part, I really think you were responsive, and the changes you made, I would concur.
I have a quick question for staff too. Emily, this handout that they gave us where it's the shutter and the trellis, what is staff's response to the shutter?
I mean, I believe that the lattice work, I would deem it to be, more historically like appropriate to the building. I mean, the guidelines say to not alter the front facades. And so, I mean, I feel like that this is an alteration to that facade compared to the lattice work that is currently there.
To do the shutter, right?
To do the shutter, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, since that's the front facade, that's why I brought it back up again too. I wanted to see what was staff's recommendation on that. I guess for me, I'm not sure. Maybe it's just a little photoshopped in image. Maybe if you brought us more detailing on it so that we could see it better. To me, it overpowers like that, the door right next to it. So it's competing. And it adds a lot of mass to that front elevation.
Emily, if you wouldn't mind, could you show that on the screen, what we're talking about?
This,
Where we're talking about where the shutters and the lattice are currently, because I didn't think that was on the front facade.
And we just received this tonight at the meeting, so we don't have an electronic version to really share on the screen.
Okay.
Okay. I was thinking.
Do we have a
I
front
think
facade?
we have is there a package with it? It's from the earlier submittal?
That's what they just got.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's a front
Oh, right
facade
there.
I'll just jump in while you're pulling that, Emma. The other thing that I would just say is the plan shows the new wall being set back kind of significant, not significantly, but it's not flush with that opening. So that's another point of clarification I think would be helpful, because and I get Photoshop images are not the clearest, but even the lattice work that's shown in this photograph looks like it's flush with that opening. And then the glass wall would be back maybe, I don't know, a foot or two. So that's just something that would be helpful to get some clarification on.
There's an existing pilaster. When I photoshopped it, I visually utilized that to be in the plane of that. However, that would not need to be the case. It could just be pushed back a couple feet clear of that. And so to be less visible.
Right.
Pushed
But-
further back.
But in this document you've given us with the Photoshop of the hurricane shutters, the lattice photos are not Photoshopped, right, Matt? They're actual.
Correct. So this is non-photoshopped here.
Yeah, okay.
And then this is the photoshopped here. So that lattice that you see
Yeah.
is non-photoshopped, and we don't know the age of it. And, I would be surprised if it were earlier than the 20th century, but, I don't think we know.
Super helpful too.
and on the photo that I have on the screen is one of the photos that I took during the site visit of one of the lattice works.
So let's go back to the shutters. I know we're still kind of on that. When you were explaining that before, you said something about panels at the bottom and glass. I'm not sure I followed all of that idea. I see the idea here of just the solid shutters. But where would the glass and the panels and all that be located?
I don't think you'd not be able to tell that from the outside, but if you were inside the space, you could say, oh, okay, well, this is solid up to here, because inside that space is a pantry, and then glass above that. I don't think there'd be any difference as seen from the outside.
Would the shutters be operable, or
No, they would be fixed.
so light would just filter through the glass?
In my mind, Matt, I just like set the shutters back a little bit. Would they be flush, or can they be set back a tad?
They can be set back as they're shown in the plan.
Is this the map right here?
Correct.
Right. So they are.
And as I had mentioned, when I did the Photoshop, I said, well, let's make it even with that front pilaster, that existing pilaster that you see at the corner. However, it could just as easily be pushed back. And it looks like it's pushed back maybe 18 inches.
Seems like you wouldn't want the shutter out 18 inches from the glass wall, especially if the shutter isn't operable, because there'd be this gap.
Correct. So that glass would be, in either situation, be right behind the shutter.
Right.
And the owners said that they were open to the idea of the lattice work. Of course, it would have to be I guess you could have just clear glass above the lattice to the ceiling, or else modify that lattice work in order to continue the horizontal lattice pieces up to the ceiling. I'm looking at the photograph here now. So I guess my question to the committee would be, ideally, would you be open to either approach, or are you opposed to the hurricane shutter look?
Can I make a comment?
Yeah.
My comment would be to help you with which one. I need to see a better detail of it.
Okay.
And like, how high does the glass go up? How high does the wall go up? I just need more delineation on both of them.
Yeah, and I would agree, especially as you mentioned, Ms. Worthington, that it is the front facade we're talking about. And I think a point that she made is the possibility of, detracting from the front door, the front entrance. It almost looks like a whole other entrance, or it could look that way. So it's tricky. It's tricky.
It is. Because the way it's expressed now, it is an entrance. It frames the entrance and invites you to that. Say, enter here.
Sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
No, I was going to say my feedback would be, I think more detail would be helpful. What worries me a little bit about the lattice is if you put a solid glass wall behind that, I wonder if that's going to bring more attention to that end than if it is shuttered. And if the whole goal is to enclose that to make that smaller pantry and keep the rest of the porches open, I wonder if putting glass behind the lattice is just going to draw more attention to it. So it is, I do feel like it's tricky.
My feedback would be, see where the horizontal is going across now. Maybe to keep that horizontal in what plan you do. I'm really comfortable with it either being the shutter or lattice, but I think that keeps it from reading as large.
Emily, could you bring up page number 3 in our package, where it does show the existing front elevation? And while you're doing that, just so I understand it, so the glass and the partition will never be seen from the exterior. It's only a part of the interior for the homeowner. So that's really not an issue for exterior, what we would be looking at.
Correct. As far as the exterior expression for the hurricane shutter option, you would see shutter, you would not see the glass. For the lattice option, you would be seeing glass so that it would introduce that material. So it would just be a different look.
Well, when they did it at Meeting of the Waters, you don't really realize there's glass.
I don't see it being inappropriate for a historic view on a facade like this one, especially since we're talking about not near the front door, but near where what I consider the original house, or what they're calling maybe kitchen house these days, existed. I'm not sure it would even be noticeable. And I think it might even blend better with the facade of the house than a trellis would, that. So I think it could be a good option.
And I know that we're not considering landscaping, but the large boxwoods and such in front of that really obscures that, and it's difficult to get a good view of that location.
Matt, can you add your two concepts, trellis and shutter, or shutter, in that elevation that's up on the thing?
Yes.
So we can see what it looks like, the whole elevation of it?
I'll be back in about 15.
Get your marker out.
Yeah, I think I lean towards the shutters personally because I think I inspected the lattice very closely. It is a modern construct. It could have been a recreation of something that was there previously, but the one sitting out there today is painted like Lowe's lumber,
Yes.
which there's nothing wrong with that. But I don't think it's contemporary to the house. I like the trade-off of enclosing this space rather than enclosing the long
agree.
porch. For that, I'm willing to concede the idea that they need this space to connect the two buildings. I agree with that functionality. And if we all agree with that, then the question is, do we really want this that glassy? Because then somebody's pantry becomes part of an elevation.
Right.
It's like, boxes of Wheaties and things, okay? So in my mind, something very simply detailed, the shutters, it could be the shutters, it could be something else even more simple with no openings. I think you probably want some openings, but my point is that something recessed from the edges allows the two masonry structures to stand on their own. It can take a back seat. I think trying to do lattice and multiple layers of glass and things could draw attention to it because it just gets complicated because all these things have to have transitions from one to the other. If it's simple and clean, then there's just less transition to detail, less things to draw your eye to. And nobody's going to come up to this and say, well, are those shutters the front door? Because it's 20-something feet back, and there's just a mass to the mansion that you kind of know. Now, if you ran around this building, you might think there's 3 entrances to the mansion, but you'll never think that it's one of that breezeway. It's just too massive. But that's my thought: is simple, subdued, set back from the corners a little bit, and I don't want to know there's any glass there, really. Or not any visibility of the stuff inside. I think the other side, facing the pond, I might feel a little differently about in terms of fenestration. It's visible from 96, but I don't think people from 96 can see your cereal box. Does that make sense? So I feel a
Yeah.
little differently on that side.
And from that standpoint, personally, if it's the shutter option, I don't even care if there's glass behind it or not. Like if that's a desire to
either.
let light in, fine. I just think about, if that's just a wall but it's shutter, to me, that's 6 one, half dozen the other, whatever the owner wants there.
That's my thought, is that the applicant's been successful in softly touching the front of the house to make the changes. Now, I would like to talk about the addition. So, anyone that wants to comment, I just, if you can pull that back up. That's fine. Or the one that shows it from the street side, because that's actually, yeah, that one. My thought, Matt, was is there any way to make that, I don't know how to say it. It just looks so simple. It's about, I think I figured out, I think it's about maybe 2/3 the length of the mansion. And is there any way to, I almost want to turn it the other direction, but I know why you're not doing that.
I don't want to, as seen in elevation, the front of the mansion, right now it stays behind that plane.
But
And
actually.
then it doesn't, and if it got pushed back, then it would get in the way of the new porch.
Cool, I know.
So I had wanted to see what I could do to rotate it out or bring it out, but then it would be visible from the front elevation. And my understanding of the guidelines was that that was not something that you encouraged. But in this
house
case,
has 3 fronts. That's the catch. You're going to
Yeah.
see it from the side street. You see it from 96 West as just kind of a aha moment. So I don't know. I'd love to hear what other people think about what if it did extend out the side some.
Well, what I'd say too, I look closely at this in the guidelines, and according to the guidelines, you're obviously entitled to the square footage in terms of size and all that. I have no qualms there, but on this particular house, I really was thinking a lot about just the massing, okay, and how it relates to the main house. The mansion is such just kind of a pure form that this particular mass just kind of is this finger that shoots out off of it. And I don't know a solution. Even as an architect myself, I'm thinking, oh, how do you attach something to this? And which is just such a pure form. I mean, it's a cube, and put this mass on there. I think just in the 3D images, it seems long out into the yard. I don't know what, I have a floor plan here. I'm not going to presume to know what the owners need or want, but if there's a way to cull that back some, I think that helps me in my mind, because it's awfully long out into the yard. I don't know what that, I mean, it's 39 feet, which is a 3-car garage, generally 34 to 36 feet, so that's longer than a 3-car garage. I could probably buy some narrative that this, had it been there a long time ago, was maybe a 2-car garage with another little piece on the back or something. But to me, it seems very long, and it's very disruptive, I think, to that kind of pure shape in my mind. And disruptive is probably too strong a word. It just seems like it interrupts that purity of that form. I know we saw another option where y'all had gone the other direction, and we kind of pushed back on that too. So,
and it was for that reason that you just described.
Yeah.
Why that was my option one, even because before I thought, well, it's better to mess with the garage than with the mansion.
yeah,
So I messed with the garage.
I wish there were a way, like, I know on the other side of the house, there's these protruding bays that bookend the front porch. And I wish there was a way to do that. I think you've started to do that with this connector, but again, we're not here to judge the square footage, but there's a lot of rooms stacked up until you get to the bathroom. And if some of that got a little more efficient, maybe the mass would just get smaller and it would pull out of the backyard a little bit and hug a little tighter to the house. It would be more comfortable then, but I still don't know until we saw it is it still kind of interrupting the purity of that cube?
So are you open to allowing the addition to extend over to the left? And so from a front elevation, you're right, there's really no front, you have 3 front elevations on this house. But the traditional front elevation, would you be okay with it being visible?
I don't know. And if this looked like a little carriage guest house off to the left, and there was some flat roof Italianate kind of connector between them, could that work and be a little more pure and subtle? I don't know. I'd have to
That-
see it.
Emily, can you scooch the plan so we see more of the mansion?
Well, I'll jump in if that's okay.
Yeah.
Ironically, I think we now really have 4 front sides because of the subdivision, because you've got a new road in here that actually faces this side. So that's what I think makes it, I'm with you. I don't think that there's any issue on square footage. When I looked at the elevations, it looked like a little shoebox sitting next to the house to me. I kept having that come out, and I saw what you tried to do to avoid getting those windows up front at that. And I'm no architect, but that roof shape just almost emphasized that to me. And it felt like it needed to be wider and shorter, but I know that comes in on the back porch. And then I was focused on the fact that that bedroom right now doesn't have any windows on the first floor because there are closets there. And I kept I pulled up a picture a minute ago to look at that just to make sure I wasn't missing it. And it does look like if it could be a little, and I know it impedes on the porch, so maybe the porch becomes deeper, I don't know, but if it could be wider and shorter, it just looks so hanging out there to me. So that's my feedback.
It kind of, I think Tyler, it looks like a garage that's been repurposed on this extraordinary house. So I feel like I want it to get a little boxier, and in my brain, at least, and I haven't seen it drawn that way, so then I don't think I would care if it, in this situation, came out a little bit to get rid of it reading like an enclosed garage.
Yeah, I want to say too, these are very minute, fine details we're talking about. I think we'll get to those details, but the only reason we're able to have these conversations is because you've done a really good job of
Yes.
laying things out. So I don't want you to feel like all these, even the last version was a beautiful plan. I think we're just being very particular and protective of this house because it's one of our most special houses in all of Franklin. So forgive us for being very particular.
Yes.
I know you put a lot of work in, and it's good work.
It's amazing.
We've got to be
work.
particular
And
on this one.
I guess I got reminded, I did a tour recently for a group from Canada, and I think I told you all this, but we went all over driving around, and their moment was Magnolia Hall. It just is.
Well, hopefully with this renovation, it'll enhance
Yes.
it. I mean, that's the goal.
It
And-
is so deserving of restoration. And I'm a huge fan of how lightly I feel like you've touched the front of the house and the back portion for the changes, but I'm going to pick on this one now.
Emily, could we go back to the 3D? I think sometimes too, when we look at 3Ds, it in that long line, the viewpoint that you take the 3D from or produce the document gives it much more of like, this is the front of the boat, it's like, and it's glaring, and it almost is not true to how I think it would look, although it is a long run. So
I would express it differently if I knew I had that
I was
latitude.
gonna
Which
ask you.
I know I had that latitude.
Try,
But
yeah,
I wasn't a huge, I felt constrained
yeah.
by that.
Well,
by
each
that
site is
requirement.
unique,
So
and
if I
so
had the little
this is a
flexibility-
special
'cause
site.
This is special.
This is special.
It's not- yeah,
And it's a
it's not
special
typical.
siding situation. And where my brain is going to is Elmore College. When Miss Elmore did the addition, honestly, she did it out to the front side. It was just a situation.
It's true.
So,
And this building already has this long run on the other side, so yeah.
You know, what I'd say that I think the other side, even in plan, you can see it's a little shorter and a little wider, like you were talking about. And it's broken up into some pieces. So you've got the addition, then you got a breezeway, then you got the old kitchen, then you got a breezeway, then you have a garage. I think I would be comfortable. I'd love to hear from everybody else. I would be comfortable with part of the addition coming out the side as long as it didn't pass the porch columns on the side. I know that's counter to what guidelines say, but if it keeps things cinched up a little closer, technically this meets guidelines. You know what I'm saying? So
Yeah.
I would rather see what ideas you have for coming out the side and let us consider them than not see it.
The other thing I would say is even if you didn't go out coming out the side, because there are no windows on the first floor there, you could almost put a peak roof if you look at the side of the building where what's the kitchen now or will be the kitchen, that peak roof comes up and it goes up beside one of the windows. You could almost do that in between the two windows on the second floor bedroom if you made the addition wider.
Oh, yeah.
You see what I mean? I know you have to deal with the porch then, but
So I wanted to keep the porch symmetrical if at all possible because of the geometry of the house.
right, okay.
So
However, and from what Josh is saying, if I understand that right, because you have the way it's designed currently, if you can bring that floor plan or that site floor plan back up that shows the house, I guess that will do. So on the front, you already have the two bump outs and the porch in between. And then on the back, you're kind of almost repeating the same thing, except it's very slender. It doesn't, well, I guess it's the same slenderness as the bump out, but the same room, and then you have the connector, and then the porch. And I think trying to make the porch to match the porch on the front, it's pushing everything to be long and narrow, rather than maybe bringing it back to the house and getting the same amount of square footage, and maybe without the connector that's showing it, which I understand where you're going with that, and I like that idea. But I just kind of think this pure box form, this four square that Tyler talks about we're going to lose a lot of that if we go back out to the side of this building. And I would rather see another solution, and that might be to make that a smaller porch and then make your addition wider, but not project as far out from the main house.
Yeah, and then that may solve your roof line tying in too, because you've got a pretty wide space between those windows where you wouldn't be having to go up and then back down and then tying in.
And really, you got to think about, it's interesting from the historical part of this house, and then not putting windows on that side, where you're thinking about putting that addition, which made a perfect place to do that, because the windows aren't there, which is it's Providence.
Well, Matt, you did say this addition was more in the vernacular of the historic home, not some, contemporary addition. And I think if you get away from a shotgun effect that's attached onto the rectangle historical, that whatever that translates into, I think the less we can get of a little tail coming off of the end of it. Give us your ideas on that. thought process with the next iteration.
Well, the first part of your comment was, okay, I could have tried to not mimic, have it be in the style of the let's say of the old kitchen, and that vernacular style. So it's another service wing coming off of the mansion, or else a more formal approach, a la O'More Mansion. And so I went with that more formal expression. And I did that just because I thought it would be less obtrusive. I knew I was designing this long, skinny addition, and I just wanted it to be just unobtrusive and not to compete or to call too much attention to itself. So that was my thought process there. And then could you please restate your second comment?
Oh, just basically like going back to the geometry of the mansion, squarish, recognizing, and I did like what you said, Tyler, about if you did bring it out to the left, the addition, of finding another line like that column porch line. Don't go beyond that if you go beyond the footprint of the home, the historical home. But to me, you've got a rectangle or a square form of the mansion, and then you've got this long shotgun that's a tail, whipping off the end of it. And really, when we see the two little, Brian, to your point, when we see the two little front rooms that encapsulate the front porch, you don't read that because it's under roof, so it just comes off looking as square. But the dimension of those, they're just as wide as the addition that you've done. So I kind of see where you're going with that, but I agree. Don't let the porch dictate how you are adding this addition on. So we're willing to look at some other options.
There might be two
Okay.
options, and the one option would be to keep something that is a connector that might be expressed as a porch element or whatever, as I do now, but then the addition, which contains the bathroom and closet, would be not long and linear, but would be maybe nearly square.
Square or L or, T.
So you'd have this clear definition of original square house, connector, and then a little square addition.
And I liked what the other option that Brian, to kind of, I keep looking in my mind, kind of hugging it more against the back of the house. And if you did that, is there a way to make the porch come over a bit more?
Option 2 would be to lose the symmetrical porch, the way I see it, and to widen the addition, and to not have a mediating element, but just to have an extension out the back. And there could be a intersecting gable facing the new road off of that addition, which would further break up its length visually.
Well, does anybody else want, I think Matt understands what we're saying. So do you want to move on to the big part of the
Yes.
bigger part? It is, the next item we're discussing is the new construction of lots 2 through 8. And this item includes 7 houses proposed on a new street adjacent to the historic Magnolia Hall. And for organizational purposes, I will ask the applicant to provide a brief overview of the proposal, and then we'll have the staff comment regarding the guidelines. Then the DRC can provide an overview discussion of the 7 houses collectively.
Is it okay if I discuss the streetscape, overall streetscape first?
Yes.
Okay. In the handout, I have the lots 2 through 11, lots 2 through 5 were submitted for DRC review, and we're submitting 6 through 8. And then 9 through 11 have not been submitted yet, but since we wanted to discuss the streetscape as a whole, I'm including those elevations as well. And then also in the packet, additional drawings of Lot 2, which there was some discussion and concern regarding, especially its side elevation that faces Boyd Mill. And again, I thank the committee for their comments and suggestions, and we took several of them to heart, namely Lot 2, Lot 5, which is a new elevation. You may recall that Lot 5 also was a Queen Anne cottage with a turreted porch, and then a re-elevation of Lot 8 in order to simplify that. And you can see all the homes in their streetscape context, and you get a sense of the range of styles that, as we had discussed before, reflect a similar range of styles within historic Franklin. Styles that range from the Queen Anne through some of the styles of the early 20th century, the Craftsman, Tudor Revival, and at least inspiration from some of the other styles like shingle and excuse me, arts and crafts and shingle. And regarding the materials, stone, brick, siding, perhaps cedar shingle. Where it is stone, it would be stone, the more formal type of stone, like on Bob Ravener's house. And that would be on one, perhaps two of the homes. Definitely on Lot 8, perhaps Lot 6 as well. Thank you. And then where there is siding, it will have a 4-inch reveal, which is more appropriate to the Victorian styles rather than the standard 5-inch. And although we're not discussing landscaping or those aspects, but the landscaping that's going to be put in will be put in at a rather mature height. I believe Bernie mentioned 17 feet tall, and that would be bonded. So in the event of a weather event or something, they would be replaced. And then height-wise, as had been discussed earlier, the elevations are all 1.5 stories. The second, no full 2-story homes, so as not to compete with the mansion. And let's see. And that is, and then regarding the roof slopes, that was the other item. Earlier, most of the roof slopes actually were over 12, and we had some discussions with staff regarding that. And one thing I did was reduce the roof slopes on the homes where I could, and then the 2 homes that I re-elevated and made sure that the slopes were less than 1212. So, whereas before on Lot 2, that was a 1412 pitch, that's been reduced to 1212. Lot 5 has been re-elevated to be a 1212. Lot 7, the front-facing gable has been reduced from 1412 to 1212. And then Lot 8 with its new elevation. And that's been reduced to actually less than 1212. And let's see. So we're very pleased with the progress on the elevations, and we look forward to your comments and questions on the streetscape.
Emily, did you want to? Emily, did you want to comment on the how they respond to the guidelines?
Yes. So the guidelines recommend to design houses with massing, scale, and proportions of new residential buildings to be compatible with nearby historic buildings and to complement rather than detract from the historic district's character. I have this itemized by just different design features. The first one is chimneys. Chimneys are to be designed to be compatible in size, height, and massing to existing chimneys on neighboring historic houses, to use stone, brick, or veneer materials. If chimney caps are desired, use clay, slate, stone, or low-profile metal caps painted to match the brick that do not overhang the rim of the chimney. Next is building height. The guidelines recommend the new buildings are to be designed for height compatibility with existing historic residential buildings on the same block face as the new residential building. Achieve height compatibility by designing within 10% of the average height of the historic buildings on the same block face. Height must also not exceed the zoning ordinance requirements. Next is lot coverage. Size the overall building footprints of all portions of the existing principal buildings, accessory structures, and proposed additions on the lot so that it does not exceed 35% of the lot, and no information has been provided with this submittal for the lot coverage for the new proposed houses. Next is the foundation and materials. Design foundations to be compatible with those of neighboring historic buildings. Use materials that are similar in character to the nearby historic buildings, such as brick, stone, concrete, or painted or parged concrete blocks. Delineate the foundation level of brick buildings through some type of belt course, such as soldier or sailor coursing. And match surrounding historic masonry in width of the mortar joints, size and scale of the bricks, color, and texture. Next is dormers. Dormers should be recessed at least 1 foot from the exterior building wall. Next is roofs. Design roof shape, height, pitch, and overall complexity to be compatible with those on adjacent historic buildings. Details and ornamentation. Avoid decorative detail that competes with, overpowers, or negatively impacts nearby historic buildings. And then accessory structures. Make new accessory structures compatible in proportions with adjacent structures. If larger than historically typical accessory structures are desired, break up the mass into small portions that reflect more traditional sizing and form. Design accessory structures to be compatible with, visually subordinate in size, mass, and height to the principal building they support. And in areas where historic garages are generally detached, new garages should appear detached. Place garages in traditional locations behind the rear plane of the main form of the house or as otherwise not be visible from the street. Thanks.
Thank you. What I'd like for us to do is for you all to provide an overview discussion of the 7 houses collectively. And then I think that, Emily, you were going to do something that showed them all to facilitate the discussion. And let's try, if you will time us, Kelly, let's try to spend about 15 to 20 minutes on this part of the discussion.
Yes, Emily's going to place the graphic that she
Okay.
produced based on the elevations up on the screen, but you also have these paper versions which show it in streetscape,
Right,
so that will be
right.
beneficial for the discussion as well.
Yeah. So anyone feel free to jump in.
I'll go first.
Okay.
I guess the first question I have is maybe the elephant in the room, but the lot coverage and it not being on here. So I think we've got to get to the bottom of that. And then just to be clear, what's shown on the concept plan for number 2 is different than the version we've got now, right? The new version.
Correct.
Okay, gotcha. I'm a little, the prior one didn't have a patio facing Boyd Mill, and I see that's been added. So that's, I think one for me is the lot coverage issue that we're going to all have to talk about. And then I may have other comments, but those were the big things that jumped out at me.
I don't think the lot coverage applies because this is zoned PD. Is that correct?
So I want to touch on that a little bit because staff and the applicant have had some conversations, and I'm realizing that we're really talking about 2 different things. When we had our conversation, we were talking about landscape surface area, which is a zoning requirement that a minimum of a certain amount, a percentage of the property be green or vegetated, able to be planted. The design guidelines has a lot coverage recommendation in there not to exceed 35%, and that involves anything covered by roof. So any building, any structure plays into the lot coverage in the design guidelines. It came up at the last meeting about the landscape surface area as well, but that is in the PD district, and Matt's right. That's looking at the whole site as a total.
But for the design guidelines, that under roof area, we still need to know what those percentages are so we can see,
Yes.
do they exceed that by lot? And if so, I know we've made, the commissions, at least as I recall, voted to allow that to be exceeded in other circumstances.
On
But-
Splendor Ridge.
Yes. So I just think we
But
need
not
that.
by much.
Right, it was, yes.
Minimal.
I just think we need that information is what looked to be missing to me.
Kelly, could you pull up that item in the design guideline?
And while she's doing that, Matt, do you know what the overall height generally of the houses are compared to the mansion?
Houses from their finished floors range from about 30'6" to 37, 38 feet is the tallest. Lot 6.
And
So
do
in
we,
that range, and then the mansion to the top of the cupola or widow's walk or whatever is, I mean, it's 44 feet.
that's not the top of the cupola, that's the roof form.
Um, Wish I had brought it. I was thinking it was 43 to 45 to the top of the cupola.
So I think when you come back to historic zoning, we'd want to know the height of the roof form.
Rather than the cupola, the roof.
The roof,
Not the
ridge.
cupola.
not the cupola, yes.
Right.
I'd just like to see it on here. You could just put the mansion on this. I know it's not in the
Yes.
streetscape, but we could
Yes.
go, there's the mansion, and it's, because to me, it's also a calculation of the proportion of the mansion's a lot of flat wall, and it's just going to hold a lot of mass, but some of these have a lot of mass too, so I'd like to compare and contrast those to a relative scale. Not any particular scale, but so they're all relative on the same sheet.
Right.
And just one note to lot coverage of the 35%. You know, I'm grateful to the developer for actually not putting houses in front of Magnolia Hall and just to the side. And I think some of that needs to be taken in consideration.
Well, I think the situation at Splendor Ridge, even though that is in the rear of the house, we did take into consideration, and I think that lot coverage is 41 or 42%. Is that right?
I believe that's roughly.
I believe that's roughly what it is. I do think we don't need to forget that this is on what was traditionally the front lawn of one of our premier houses. So I try to balance that against it also. But I think it's going to be important to see something. This, to me, I wish there could be a three-dimensional computer-generated model of the project. I feel like it's one of the most important projects that we've reviewed.
And I assume we'll be seeing the individual plans for each one of these
Yeah.
separately, correct?
The, well, in the DRC package, you have the, oh, you're talking about the floor plans?
Yes, the floor plan. I
We can
see.
show you the floor plans if you want. You can see the floor plan, how the general layout is on the site plan for lots 6 through 8.
And every side elevation, I personally think it's too ambitious to review in one meeting every elevation of all the houses,
I
of
do
all
too,
these.
yeah.
I'd, maybe two at a time, but something. Or have some type of meeting that extends, that we take breaks or something, but I think it's a bit ambitious.
Yes, staff had suggested that the original 2 through 6 that were on that last agenda that was a very long meeting come back so that you'd have a chance to provide any additional feedback, because it was at the very end of the agenda. So we wanted to be able to show you these all at once to be able to get your feedback. But we could start with the ones that you haven't seen yet and give feedback on those if you would like to break it down that way.
That's fine. We're going to move then from our overall discussion to if you have comments on individual houses, and you're suggesting we start with, is it 9? I'm confused which ones. It's 2 was changed, right?
Yes, so we were formally submitting lots 6, 7, and 8 for discussion.
Okay.
And there have been changes to a couple of the homes, lots 2 through
Right.
5, that I wanted to discuss.
So if we go house, do y'all, I don't really care which house we start with, but two and just go work our way down the street. Okay. Are there any comments on
So
two?
on 2, I think massing wise, the fenestration, love to see more kind of closer up the details on the, you know, not that we have to see every piece of molding and such, but obviously this one's going to have a little bit more. It kind of has some Victorian Queen Anne kind of things going on. So love to see some more on that. I don't have a problem with the massing necessarily. I'm looking at this elevation that you handed out. And it looks like on the front elevation, the color one, that this roof mass here is actually shorter here than it is on this front elevation, which I think will help you. This one's more real, right?
Yeah, so the front elevation, I adjusted the color elevation to reflect the 1212 slope.
Because that mass sticking out this side facing gable is
And-
not as tall as it's shown on here.
And I believe that it's taller on the color one because that's still probably the 1412 height of that gable. And so when I drew that gable on this, for the side elevation at 1212, it brought that height down.
Okay,
And
but I think that helps you because the massing will come down a couple feet, at least on that street side, which is the public view shed really for, I mean, I drive past there going to the park for baseball games, and we're gonna see this more than we're gonna see the mansion or any other house, so sensitive to it.
And the and that'll be so heavily landscaped. I don't believe that you'll be able to see much of the house actually, because it's going to be very dense landscaping right off the bat. The big change plan-wise, I included the revised plan, was to rotate the garage. So it's not a continuation of the main body of the house, but it's connected with a breezeway connector. It's set back approximately 18 feet. So in that perspective view, you can see that the garage is kind of peeking out around the corner of the end of the house. The end of the house is now defined by that master bedroom. So visually, it won't seem like this just big one long house, but it'll have that,
Right.
it'll be broken up.
Sure.
I think that helps to break it up that way. I know the applicant desperately wants landscaping to be, and that it's bonded and everything. We're just not allowed to consider it as I understand it. But I do have a little bit of a concern about that back patio off the master suite that's new, right there on Boyd Mill, facing Boyd Mill.
I drew that in, and it's not an essential feature of the design. I'm certainly willing to reconsider that. I believe I drew it in because in my mind, that is going to be a very private area because of how heavy the landscaping was going to be. It was going to be something that I thought, well, the owners could enjoy a small private backyard and access it, but it wouldn't be visible from the street because of the landscaping. But I can, certainly consider that.
So it's just an uncovered patio, just like a site feature. I don't have a problem with it being located there. If it doesn't have a roof over it, if it's not building any mass, it's just a
Correct.
paved section, or maybe not paved, it's whatever it is. Okay, just clearing up if it had roof or not. but,
Okay.
Yeah.
And Matt, I'd like to say there's a good variety of designs that we're seeing through here. So compliment the architect and the job you've done on that. My main area of comment would be on the fenestration patterns of basically all the houses. all of them have transoms above the main windows. And that is not a historic pattern that you see on windows. And I think those need to be maybe rethought. I'm looking at some of the architectural features, maybe like the bay window. They might be appropriate, something like that. But on the main structure, I mean, everywhere. I mean, they're under the porches. They match really the transoms above the doors. It's something you really wouldn't see. I think in the future, it's going to date the house. It won't look as historically harmonious to the main house and historic neighborhoods. Some of the windows, like even on, let's see, this would be lot number 4, what's in the gable, with the addition of the transom above that window, it's the same size as the window on the, this is on the second floor, in the brick portion is the same size as the windows on the first floor. And I think it was probably done that way to try to make them match. But if you look at the dormer, those windows now, at least in this perspective, are above the window in the dormer. So I think those should be a little more subordinate probably to the first floor. It's just those fenestration patterns. I don't know if this is the time to bring those up, but I have, because when they come back to us, like even on lot 5, you know, I don't quite understand even the transoms that are above the windows on the porch. They should really be, you know, 1/1. I think that would be a more appropriate historic appearance. You could say the same thing on lot number 6. And then you've also got kind of a little awning that looks like it's kind of built into the shake gable. And then also, I don't know if those are vents, and this would be on lot 6, vents on each of the gables on each side of the porch. I mean, these are just questions I would have when you bring these back before us. And even like on lot 8, when I see the end of the porch, it almost looks like a Greek revival element with a pediment and columns that are different than the porch columns. It's just, you know, things for consideration. And I'll let those be my main comments.
I'd like to add on top of that, because that's sort of where I was going too. I was trying to figure out, like lot number 8, to me that was French Quarter style with 2 wall panels on each end, the 2 firewalls. Could you list us, like, what were the styles you were going after? Like, if number 4 was a Tudor, I think it'll help us register forms, window shapes, door shapes, architectural elements, delineating roof lines, those kind of things, if you would key us in onto which style you were emulating with each of these lots. Maybe not right now, but just when you come back.
Okay.
Because then we can, like Brian said, identify window type that would match for that. Door type, everything. Chimney style.
I am not a fan, which I said before, of the turrets. I don't believe that we have cottages, Victorian houses. I mean, these aren't cottages, so I shouldn't say that. Houses in Franklin that have anything of this scale. I've looked at some this afternoon. I feel like the turrets are just out of proportion to what you would traditionally see, and I believe that the houses need to be quieter than just the fanciest of that kind of thing we have in town. I'm not sure we have. I like the Tudor house on 4, but I think it could calm down a bit with the pitches, because I think we're getting into the fanciest of that style we have, and we're putting them on the front lawn of a really magnificent house. So I'm a bigger fan of something that reads a bit quieter, like our traditional form, like Lot 8 and 9, I think read a bit quieter. I think the chimneys are exaggerated more than is necessary. I'm trying to cover things that somebody else didn't cover. I don't know if anybody said anything about the dormers are kind of dropping down into the roof. And then on the Boyd Mills side, that side elevation, to me, Matt, that second kind of the dormer element behind the first section of the house, it just looks like it's hanging there. This one, the kind of box one. So, I just would love to see. They're beautiful, but in this context, I would like to go to nod a bit more to Magnolia Hall. Thank you.
Yeah, I would agree, Mary, with your comments, and especially those turret roofs. As you were commenting, they definitely detract from the historic home, and I mean, our goal here is to make that the main event, which I think lots 5, 6, 8, 9, 10, 11 accomplish that to a certain degree. Certainly, we would need to know more about the detailing and what Mr. Laster said about the transoms. I think that's a very perceptive comment he made. It adds intricacy to each one of these homes, and if we took some of those out, that would simplify the patterns. And then the chimneys, it's hard to compare. Again, our guidelines state that the chimneys need to be consistent with what we see on the historic property, but we have no comparison point side by side, so it's hard to determine that. And materials, like the foundation materials.
Be stone would be the typical foundation material.
Speaking of stone, on Lot 7, I feel like that is an awfully lot of stone on that front elevation. It comes as a stone wall, I think, across the porch and then onto a screen porch. Is that right, Matt? And there's easy ways to fix it.
It is foundation, you're right. It's very tall.
It's a lot.
Which one of these is the largest footprint? Do you know?
I believe that lot 11 is.
And is that the one that gets up close to Magnolia Hall?
That's the last one, so that's the one that's closest to the
Yeah.
to 96.
Pond.
6 and 7 are the ones.
So
6 and
it's not
7.
yes.
Yeah,
Okay.
5, really 5 is right before you get to it, and then 6 and 7 are the closest.
Gotcha.
6, 7.
Yeah.
6, 7, 8 are
Yeah,
kind of
and
right
the
next
others
to
are
it.
behind.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
We're
That's
pulling up the aerial view of the lots
Yeah.
for your reference.
Matt, do you know what the lot coverage is of from the roofed area on these yet?
No, I apologize. I thought that the design guidelines specified zoning districts, and perhaps I was mistaken. The historic guidelines, so that's why I didn't provide that. I didn't bring that information.
There are just a couple different parts of looking at lot coverage, and one is the landscape surface area, and the other one is buildings. And in the design guidelines, buildings is across all residential buildings, not necessarily by zoning district.
Yeah, I was just trying to get a sense if we knew how high it was, but we can.
The first 5 are within they're at about 35%. And then the other ones are in the 43, 45%. It's important to keep in mind, especially when comparing it with, let's say Splendor Ridge, that we have such a tremendous area of open space here.
Right.
That is not present in a project like that.
Yeah.
And that in order to be sensitive to the mansion, the developer, very intentionally did that in order to respect the mansion.
Right.
And that was part of what was discussed on Splendor Ridge as well. Because
Right.
there's quite a bit of open space there.
There's more there than you would think.
Realize, right.
But this, yes, this is, the Historic Zoning Commission actually has the discretion to make a decision on what would be appropriate for this site. But from what the developer first brought in, he certainly changed the plan. There's no doubt about it, to leave more open space.
And I think that if we reduced footprints on 6 through 11 to get them down to or close to 35%, I don't think that would be an apparent or very marginally apparent difference from the way they are now. And, as we discussed, the very obvious and apparent spatial quality is the tremendous amount of open space.
And as far as the historic home goes, I feel like there's grace for sure on the last 3 that are toward the lake area.
Matt, I've got, I'm looking at the turrets and porches and such a little closer too. On lot 2, that conical roof, is it conical or pyramidal or just
It's
octagonal?
octagonal.
Yeah.
Octagonal.
We have some round roofs here on, is they both on Main Street? Yeah.
But it's much more
has
slender.
a flat roof, and one has a real skinny
Yeah.
turret. But the one is about this scale, but it has a flat roof. You might look at that as an idea. And then I don't personally have a problem necessarily with turrets, but I think they say something about the form and the function and what's happening there. And what I see in like lot 3 is that bay and turret actually protrudes on the first floor and the second floor, according to the site plan, if that holds true. Whereas on lot 7, that turret has nothing underneath it. So not only is it a massive feature, but there's no mass holding it up underneath. It's a flat wall with a round wall cantilevered over it, and the porch is
Over
kind of hiding that.
Part of, yes,
Yeah, which
Over
which
part of
works,
it.
but I think in real life when we don't see it in 2D, it's going to be this round wall that it is apparently not sitting on something. And it'll be a lot more apparent when you're standing out there. So it's kind of a peculiar geometry to me on that particular one, especially because it's directly opposite the front of Magnolia Hall. Does that make sense?
and I looked at examples that had it both ways, where it was cantilevered, in the style of this.
Well, if you have any
Queen
of those
Anne style,
precedent
and-
images, I think it
and-
helps us to bring them and say, I found this in, Oregon, and it came from arts and crafts or shingle style, and I don't have a problem with mixing up some styles that maybe we don't have a lot of or any of, but I like to see how successful they are, and usually if they charmed you, they might charm us as well. So I'd like to see those kind of things.
Well, and I'll just say again, I'm a broken record. On one of our fanciest streets in Franklin, West Main, there are 2 turrets. On this one small street, there are 3 competing with one of our premier National Register properties. So I'm just going to be a broken record on that. So that, to me, I appreciate what Tyler's saying about having integrity architecturally, but there won't be the day, I just want to be clear, that at least for me, that I will be comfortable with 3 turrets on this street per our guidelines that say that we're to protect the site and setting and context.
And Matt, the round porch element that Tyler mentioned is the old Williams County Funeral Home that was on Main Street.
Okay.
But it doesn't have a turret. It just, the porch has a round element.
Yes. Which, to me, that house is on the quiet side of things.
It's a beautiful house. I remember when recently it was kind of turned into single-family home again.
Yes,
is that
that's
true?
right.
It's a beautiful house.
It's beautiful. It had been closed in and remodeled for years.
I think if you're willing to kind of concede on some of the towers or turrets, then I don't think anybody's against one if it's done right, and maybe one makes more sense than the other. There may be, say, on Lot 7, a different way to do that mass. I suspect you need that square footage. Not to mention that whatever's in that space is going to have a fantastic front yard view and of the property across the street. There might be a way to do that differently. And then I agree with Brian on the windows. One of the things that is peculiar about the massing too, and I'd love to see some scale figures in here. We've got a lot, even on lot 2, you can see you got one bearing height at the porch, you got another thing at the front gable, the side facing gable's a whole other bearing height. I know those things are necessary sometimes, but I want to make sure those mechanisms aren't overused, because it can make things. Sometimes it tricks me, and I look at drawings all day, every day. And if it tricks me into thinking that the scale's better, and then it gets built and the scale's not what I thought it was, because we can trick the eye in drawings. Not that you're intentionally doing that. I just want to make sure we understand all those bearing heights and scales with a figure in them. And I think to Brian Laster's point, when we see a scale figure in there, we start to understand the scale of the fenestration too. It helps us understand things like window pane sizes. Lot 2, if those are really 2/2s, those pieces of glass are going to be gigantic. And typically in divided light of that scale, they may not be that big. I just don't know till I see that scale figure. But the transoms, little peculiar. We see them obviously, but not in this configuration, not this many. Lot 4, materiality. Love to see some more details on, I see you have some brick surrounds and such. Even if those are just zoomed in shots of some of those details that are kind of intentional architectural moves, I'd want to see some of those. And then lot 9 looks like it has some dental molding, or I can't tell exactly what it is, but that's what it looks like on the drawings. Love to see any of those details that are really kind of bold steps out, like the dental molding, like some of those masonry surrounds with the cut limestone and all that. Want to see those up close a little bit better. Those are all my comments.
Thank you. Does it, I think, do you feel like, Matt, you have reasonable direction? Or is there anything else you want to ask somebody to weigh in on?
Yeah, I think I have good direction.
You do? Okay.
Yeah. I can't think of any
And
follow-up
you know,
questions right now.
staff is here too, so
Okay,
it's a big project.
it is.
A lot of it.
Is there anybody else that has anything for the good of the order on this? If not,
I just wanted to just remind the applicant of what Tyler said, which I thought was a really good idea, to do a rendering so that we can have some kind of a height comparison between the historic house and the, especially particularly 6, 7, and 8.
Yeah, not just the height. I mean, the width, the bearing heights. There's some inherent horizontal lines created on the mansion from porches and such that I think have a lot to do with where the height of these porches land. I want to see
right.
all that together because
Right.
it's going to
And
make or
that's
break
why
this.
3D modeling would be
Yeah.
very helpful.
Yeah, and taking
So-
into account grade. I mean,
Right,
just
everything.
because
And, you know, lots of times, I've noticed on some of our monster houses that are approved in Franklin, in the context of little houses, the eave lines mean everything on how much grace there is. So I think we've all got the same goal, and it's an exciting project. So if there's nothing else, do we have a motion to adjourn? Or do you have something? Okay.
We have the other.
Oh, that's right. You showed up. Excuse me. We will go back.
Okay. you're
Thanks,
welcome.
Matt.
Thank you.
Thank you, Matt.
Thank you all. You're welcome.
Gave us a lot to look at.
And thank you for always being responsive, for you and the developer for being responsive. That's what I thought when I forgot you walked in, but I thought she thought it was at 5. That does. So we're going to move to discussion of alterations at 800 Fair Street. And if you want to take a few minutes and just go over the project, Amanda.
Hey guys, I'm Amanda McCreary, the architect. Do I have to introduce myself at DRC? So this project at 800 Fair Street is a simple one story with an existing front dormer, small pyramidal style, I would say, especially with the 2 different eaves two different roof lines that happen on the project. It already has an addition put off the rear. We have pictures from it, the house in 1981, and the addition is not on it, so we do know it happened sometime in the 80s. off of that rear addition. We are looking to do a couple of things. One, we want to be able to utilize some of the attic space that we have that's existing. We've got some pretty decent head heights up there, believe it or not. But that would entail adding some dormers. So looking to put some dormers on the rear portion, that 1980s portion off the rear. Also looking to add a screen porch off the rear of the property as well. I was talking to my clients, and interesting enough, a lot of the projects we've worked on have been much smaller lot sizes. So, I'm not sure I've presented a screen porch to you all in the past. So I'm interested to hear some feedback on that. I put this in the plan, but I also would like to talk about it. So, the portion, there's kind of like that middle line across, that's the old historic house. And that addition with the tall, skinny windows that's existing, we're looking to put the dormers on that portion. But we would also, and I know we talked about this on the project right beside of this one, we had initially come through with some dormers and that was denied, but we talked about maybe doing some egress skylights. We are interested in doing some egress skylights on the historic portion of the house as well. So wanted to talk through that.
And from a staff perspective, the screen porch appears to meet the intent of the design guidelines, and the step down in roof form is appropriate in terms of the addition. We did want to get the DRC's feedback on the dormers and the shape and style of the dormers related to the dormer on the front of the house. Thank you.
And I will say one thing about that too. So, this house has an existing driveway to the left of it. So it's got a little bit more breathing room on the left side of the house. On the right side of the house, it's pretty close to its neighbor. And so we purposely did put the larger dormer on the right side of the house where you don't have the sight lines to see that. I will mention that as well. So right now the dormer that we're looking at on the left side of the house is smaller in scale. Well, I still don't know if you'd see it, but you do have more breathing room if you're walking down the street of seeing that side. But the other side is so close to its neighbor, it is very difficult to see anything. So that's why it's oriented that way. And that's also why the screen porch and different pieces are oriented that way as well.
Okay. Does the Historic Zoning Commission wish to comment?
Can we pull up a street view of this property? Okay. So as to the dormer that you're talking about, it's not visible from the street.
It would not be. We were looking through and we were walking it, and it's really, really close to its neighbor. And the master bedroom that's downstairs actually has this existing bay window bump out on it as well that blocks your view even further. So between the existing fence lines that are there and the existing roof structures, you can't see that portion at all. It's just so tight in that space. So you can see here, see the bump out that's existing. It's beyond that bump out on the roof that's tacked back there that you can't see at the moment.
And that's where the dormer would be.
Yes.
Yeah. And then can you show us the small dormer again?
And that's on the other side. Which has the driveway side.
Is there a way, Amanda, to make that have a bit more the scale of the front
It matches
dormer?
the front.
It does?
That one does, yes.
Okay.
Yes, that one's the exact same scale as the front
Okay.
dormer.
And the ingress egress skylights are not shown, right?
They aren't. We put a note on the plan to discuss it. We were looking at some different placement options. I know it was something we entertained, with the neighbor next door. So wanted to see if that was still on the table. We would like to have it. We'd like to have two of them if possible. It's just pretty dark up there, and that whole front room doesn't have any egress. And we would like to have two, one on either side. This side, it would probably be in front of the chimney. It would have to be to get it to work. On the other side, it could be behind the chimney.
I think that's going to be pretty visible.
I do too.
That
And it would have been visible on the neighbor next door too, because their roof line's even smaller when we were discussing it over there.
And then can we look at the way the screen porch connects on the other side of the house? I mean, the screen porch is definitely within the limits of size.
I think if you go to the first floor, you'll be able to. So scroll up one more. So the screen porch again is justified to the right because that's our tighter side, and gives a little bit more breathing room on the left where
Right.
we have the driveway that comes in.
Am I right on the driveway side?
The left side.
Yes. You have a break in the roof line, but not on
Yes,
the other side.
That's correct. That is correct. We already have the break that's existing.
Yes.
From the 1980s edition. So we are following suit on the right side. Gives us a little bit more headroom.
I wouldn't be a fan of that if it had any visibility, because I don't think it meets the intent of the guidelines, but I really think it's low visibility. So for that reason, I would be okay with it. But I'd love to hear what some other people think.
I concur. Would you like to hear something else?
Okay.
Okay.
Yes.
About about the egress skylights. And the neighbor next door, are those in place?
No, we never
Not
pursued
yet.
it. We discussed
Okay.
it when we got denied for the dormers on the house next door. It was recommended that we come back with egress skylights.
Okay.
And we did not pursue that option. So
Okay.
as of now, it's status quo.
Okay. When you come back, would you plan on showing us more of
I
that?
will. Yes,
Okay.
yes. I just wanted to, I know we've talked about it, and there is one on 4th.
There is.
There's one on 4th, and you can see it from the street. It's on the front main gable of the house. And so that was,
Well, it's actually behind the chimneys.
it is behind the chimneys, but it is on the front.
A little,
Okay.
more difficult to see. So let me go back to these. So we're talking about the dormers. And all you have to have egress.
Yes.
Does your shed dormer and the small dormer, do they not supply your egress?
The big dormer would supply the egress. The other dormers do not.
So
They
they're
are
really-
nowhere close.
So it sounds to me, and I'm just it sounds like me that the egress skylights are basically just skylights. Or are
No.
are they actually fulfilling the purpose of egress?
They will fulfill the purpose of egress. Yeah, the front dormer that's existing does not meet egress. And then the little dormer we're proposing on the left side would not meet egress. The shed dormer on the right is the ones that would meet egress. So anything that happens in that front portion of the house, the skylight would be what is put in place to meet the egress requirements.
So they are bedrooms then?
Yes.
It's shown on the plan, the front room as being a bonus room and full bath. Does that require, Randy, the egress as well? That front bonus room, since it's not characterized as a bedroom, is it okay? Sure. The front room where there's the existing dormer is shown as a bonus room, and then the back is shown as a bedroom where they have the window that meets egress. Does that work? Can they use that as a bonus room?
They can use that as a bonus room.
Just can't be a bedroom?
Correct. It's not.
Okay.
And we've entertained the idea of it being a bedroom, but also knowing that there's children up there, the architect and me also really, really, really would prefer some sort of egress from there, and especially for whatever use in the future.
Those two spaces are connected, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
And there's a door to the
Yeah,
bedroom.
so per code, I have an emergency escape opening on that floor, which is what is required. Now, if that were to become a sleeping room, then it has to meet that emergency escape
Separate.
opening requirement separately.
And if we put bunks and the eaves in there, that would require an egress.
If there are bunks on there, then we're going to
Okay.
treat it like a
Okay.
sleeping room.
You know, like the
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, the skylights are a hard sell for me. I think there's, you know, I'd be more apt to give you a dormer that doesn't match on the left side, that's a little taller, and move the bedroom door over so that window's open to that bonus bunk room. And then the dormers, I would love to see a front elevation and see how far they poke out. Obviously, they're going to poke out, but it's pretty far back. But I'd still like to see it. You know, one of the dormers has a hip roof, the other one has a shed.
Yeah, and the hip roof on the left side is because that's the one that's more visible, and that's to match the front.
Yeah.
The shed is partly a function of head height and space.
And now,
I tried it with a hip. I couldn't get it to work.
so that bedroom in the back is all dormer. There's not enough
On the right side.
headroom to mess with, probably back there,
No.
unless you have the big dormer.
And there's enough headroom in the front, but if we add dormers in the front, then,
Yeah.
you know, and I know that opens up a whole other can.
Yeah.
I've been down that road once. So, I mean, it's tricky.
So the existing dormer in the front does not meet.
No, those windows that you see that are there are the smallest size egress windows that I can get in. So to show you from a proportional standpoint, the existing one does not.
Is the front window, the front dormer window, is it an operable window?
It is not currently operable.
Okay.
That's another
Yeah.
item we would love to make it operable.
Because I think if it would have been, then it's just kind of grandfathered in. It's an old window, barring some threshold of.
Our policies as far as sleeping rooms, when we create a sleeping room in a space that was not previously a sleeping room, then it has to meet the current code for
Gotcha.
emergency escape
Somebody
opening.
slept in that attic.
I mean,
Yeah, I'm sure.
it's studded up now. I mean, we got a floor and some studs up there, so something was happening. But it isn't operable. We would like to make it operable. That's a discussion too.
What about going back to what you were saying about making, on this elevation, which elevation is this? The
Left side.
On the left side, making
South
that
side.
larger, or, I mean, making that a shed dormer too, it's an addition, and just giving the egress that way.
Well, and that would work, but that's still on the back side of the house, so that doesn't help any of the space that's on the front portion of the roof structure. So that would function well for the back side.
What I was saying is if the door were moved to
Right.
the bedroom and that path were open to that window from the front,
Right.
then
Yeah,
you
if you
would
mo-
meet egress.
Because right now you're looking at three dormer shed or hip, and then two skylight. I mean, that's a lot of visibility for that little house.
It is. It is.
Yeah, I would not be a fan of the skylights on the original part of the house with
So
as much
would-
visibility.
Would you
as-
be open to it if we did it on the right side behind the chimney?
You still
Because I
see
think
it.
that is similar to what is on the house on Fourth.
Is that the right side right there?
No, it's the other side.
Okay.
And I have to say too, the house on Fourth is a very large house, and it goes way back to an addition that they put onto. I
It
mean,
does.
it is distant from the front sidewalk.
You know, and in my mind, I'm cognizant of the fact as well that, you know, people want to use the space they have upstairs,
Yes.
and they're foregoing using site to go out. Well, they're doing that with screen porch, but theoretically they could have added on more. You know, so I want to be kind in that regard, but at the same time, it's like, well, we also have to be protective. Otherwise, everybody will have a skylight going down the road. And I think even I'm looking at the next step over on this same street view towards the north side of Fair there, and you can see on the other side of that chimney pretty clearly. And that skylight's not going to be the Home Depot tiny one. It's a big window. We've used them. I know how they look, and they're not bad looking, but it's not what you'd expect on a historic home. So I don't know if I can get behind that.
I'd still like to see it,
Yeah.
just so we can say no, you know? But we could
Bring show
maybe
and
say
tell.
yes.
Option 1, option 2.
Yeah, I mean, you're entitled to bring
Anything.
Right,
things,
right.
show
I know.
and-
But I want to get my warm and fuzzies from this meeting.
Yeah, the screen porch I think is fantastic.
Yeah.
We see a lot of your projects. You do a great job. So
Right.
we know that you have a heart after our own. But yeah, we'd have to look closer at those. And if there's another way to do it architecturally, me personally, I have no problems with the dormers on the addition as long as they're scaled appropriately. No really bigger than you really need them to be.
Right.
And I'm willing to look at those in lieu of skylights. I know you're wanting both because there's two separate spaces, but if there's a way to figure out the geometry where they can all be on the back in terms of that egress, I would be more comfortable.
Yeah.
I would
Change the
agree with
whole-
that.
And that's what they did on Fourth.
Right.
I mean, they made it so just that one could be the egress.
Right. And then have you guys, I know we've done them before, but we've always done them in the back, but are you open to solitubes? They get the little light shafts, so on the roof they just look like
Sonotubes.
yeah, solar tubes.
Solitude, yeah.
Solitube. They don't have an R in them, I think. I think they're solitube.
I think bring a picture one. To
Okay.
me, if those are placed behind the chimney,
Because we've done it on West Main, so I can bring a picture of it, but they.
Sort of looks like that thing on the roof.
Yeah, I was gonna
it
say,
kind-
it
they
doesn't
kinda
look
look like
much
it-
different
no.
than devices that
It
go on
doesn't.
a roof anyway as part of venting and that sort of thing. If one of the goals is to get natural
Right.
light in, that's always a good way to get some natural light in. And we can do a small, I mean, they make huge ones, but that's a big, smaller ones.
Randall, how much does the dormer on the front miss being an egress?
That I cannot answer without having the dimensions. It has to be 5.7 square feet on the second floor.
It's a long way.
It's a long, and so several years ago, the egress, this is what I was actually, when Matt was sitting here,
Yeah.
you know, it's really, really challenging these days, even in new construction, because your egress windows have to be so big that
Big.
your proportions get off from historic. And that's a pet peeve of mine, because it's usually bigger and smaller, and it's really messing up some proportions because of that. But we're a bit of ways off on the egress window there.
However, practically, if children, you mentioned children
It
in that
is. Yeah,
space.
I mean,
If
you
it were
can
an
egress,
operable- If it were an
yes.
operable window, a child could get
Yes,
at that.
practically, yes. And that makes me feel better. I would really like to make this window operable, preferably with a new one, so it operates correctly, because it's going to have to awning out.
Yeah, most of those egress rules have a lot more to do with the fire department getting in with a tank on
Than-
their back
yeah.
than it does people getting out.
Got it.
Yeah,
Yeah, I just
Otherwise, they'll
kept
just break it.
thinking if it
got a hole in the roof.
did that, and
Yeah,
if a good
and I would-
window maker made
If
it,
nothing else, I definitely would like to, it just makes me feel
and I
better,
don't think you'd ever
even if it is a
know.
bonus room.
It can't be that high off the ground either, that window.
You can just slide right off.
I mean, like the 24-inch rule, it can't be.
It's, yeah,
Is
because
it
it's
right there?
it's right at the spring line of where the two different roof pitches meet, and we have maintained that. So with the new dormers, that's the other thing. Is I guess in theory I can bring that dormer forward per guidelines, but I've put it back so it stays consistent where those two
Pitches
lines meet. Yeah, where the two
Nice.
pitches meet, and so that gives a nice detail, but that also kind of limited the sizes with the big shed dormer on the right. So I felt like the lesser of the two evils was to put it on the line where their two are meeting.
Sure.
And just as a side note, so there's a connection between Magnolia Hall
Ooh,
and this house.
I love Brian Lassiter stories.
because the man who built Magnolia Hall, his daughter married Wiley White, and they own the house that Gene Wagner had, which is the federal that's being redone. And they built these two houses as rental houses.
Oh,
So there is a connection to what we just
Wow.
did.
that's fun. So these are the income for the big house.
It is just like, what, 7 degrees from W.S. Campbell.
Yeah, that's perfect. I love it.
Yeah.
You know, it's really interesting too because clearly that addition was before historic, and the windows are way wacky. But they're taken from an old cabin, and they're wood, and they're divided light wood, and they casement in. So they're actually very beautiful. You know, the scale's a little funky, but
Right.
they're really pretty. Yeah. So we're also trying not to mess with that as much either. Well, thank you
Thank
guys.
you.
Thank you for letting me tag on to the end of the agenda. I
Of
apologize for.
I even
I know. Well,
I was going just blank that you came in, but when you came in promptly at 5, I thought, okay.
I mean, I think I've done it one other time in my years of
Right.
being here. The flip flop back and forth will get me every now and again. But thank you guys.
Thank you. Yes. Okay. Is there a second? All in favor? Aye.
Thanks, Amanda.
Thank you.